All right. So thanks for joining me here on VO Tech Simplified. I had to look, I had to look and see what this is called. This morning I did Heller's Ask Us Anything, which really this is also Ask Us Anything, but it's tech focused. And normally I do these on Tuesdays. If you're watching this live, I had a funeral for a gentleman, an uncle who lived a fantastic life. So we really had a celebration of him being around. So it was super great to see some of my relatives who I would have never taken the time off to see under normal circumstances, but had a great time, which is kind of weird, But when someone lives in their late 80s and they're so inspirational, then there's nothing I can do but smile and be happy for. I hope I do it as well as my uncle. Anyway, let's switch subjects here. So we're going to talk about couple things that came up in some of the different groups, and then of course take your questions. One of the things super helpful, be sure to leave a comment. I can hear you. And Colette, thanks. Yeah, so it's good. Took some time up, and appreciate. So I appreciate everyone checking in the next day, next week, and beyond. We'll be back to our normal Tuesday times, and I was flying yesterday and coming back, and it's weird. Yeah, I wouldn't take the time off on one hand, but family stuff, we all do that, and we should, and it worked out great, and happy to be back home and working on other fun stuff. So a couple of things that came up in one of the groups. So somebody in, let me see if I can find it here. That'll be right here. So RX10 has some release notes. And what's happening in RX is that they have a new version, 10.5.0. Came out a couple days ago, yesterday, as a matter of fact, based on the release notes. And they've done this, and this is going to happen. Changed minimum supported Mac OS to Monterey. Now that's going to continue to come up over time. So someone asked a question in the group, I think it was Joe, about in the RX group about, hey, what happens if I just hang back? Well, in theory, so first things, RX is a really complicated application, and people don't realize that in addition to all the things that it does, it does support plugins. And because it supports plugins, it has all sorts of dependencies on the operating system. And so what you end up with is that there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the background that people don't really realize. And so having operation OS support is a big deal, and testing takes forever. It is amazing how much they have to test. As voiceover artists, we tend to use a minor subset of RX. Now, if you're using advanced and you have some things going on there, yeah, you definitely want to make sure you're keeping up. But so what's the upside? What's the downside of, hey, I'm back on Catalina, which is a few generations ago. I don't remember when Catalina actually stopped shipping. I could find that out. But it's been a couple years, multiple years, because Ventura has been out for a year and I don't know, it's probably 14 months right now, something like that. Don't quote me on those exact dates, but it's been a bit. And almost every year Apple comes out with a new OS. I hate that when it happens, but Ventura's been out, a long time. And we have the latest one. Sonoma's been out long enough that they're at 14.3 as of this discussion today. So to be back a generation. So what do you give up if you stay behind? Well, number one, most things that we're going to use are going to work under either of them, but you get into this unsupported territory. And most of the things that we use are not so super complicated in RX standard. But what are you going to lose? Well, here's the dirty secret in this business. There are a bunch of hackers out there, and AI is making this worse. They're able to find holes faster in the operating system than ever before in the history of that's not true. In the old days, they could find them too. But over the last 5 or 10 years, security has become a big deal. And both Apple and Windows and Microsoft have to have this constantly running whack-a-mole system where they are trying to stop hackers from getting in and basically getting into our machine and getting access to information we don't want them, to where they can monitor your browser, your keystroke, your passwords. And what are the odds it's going to happen to you? Well, it's a little bit like I parked my car out in some cities here in this country. I've seen on the news San Francisco's had a set of break-ins where people are just going and looking in the backs of cars, and if you have something in there, they break the window and they grab something. It's totally at random. We had a server that was attacked approximately, I want to say it's 3 months ago. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. Our servers with I have some courses on RX. I have some courses on Studio One. I have some courses on voiceover related topics at bojumpstart.com. And our server was attacked. Now, we are such a small fish in this overall thing. Was it that they targeted us? Heck no. We were at the wrong place at the wrong time, meaning software from the hackers can scan millions of IP addresses, and our server came up in their scan of having a plugin that has over 1 million installs, and yet it had a security hole in it that was 3 weeks old. And so that what happened was when people tried to go to our site, they'd get redirected, and they were really deviously clever about what it was doing, where it would redirect them to different places, but it wouldn't redirect everybody. So it was kind of a random thing. So at first, when the problem got reported, that someone would go to our site and they would get sent to a site that you could buy things. They got sent to a porn site. They were redirected to all these different places. And sometimes they weren't redirected, which makes it appear like there's a problem on the other end. It was really, I thought it was deviously clever. But this piece of software, we were 3 weeks out of date in terms of keeping up with the security stuff. And, our little dashboard showed that there was an update, but we didn't understand at that minute that it was going to be that serious. Then a hacker found out that, if you were running an older version, they could go ahead and they could break into our server, and they changed something. So is that going to happen to you? Odds are no. But could it happen? If you hang back on the older operating systems, they have security flaws that don't get fixed at the same level as the newer ones. There's also some performance things that come in. And then a couple of things, on your software, if you want to check out for the latest, if you're using RX, for example, in Windows, it's help about. On my Mac, it's going to be Isotope RX, and there's going to be an about as well. And when I click on it, it's these tiny little letters in the lower right-hand corner. I'm still on 10.4.2. Well, the update to 10.5 only came out a day ago, and I see it's for the Mac. I'll update this tomorrow. I'll update this by the next time we see it, so I'm running their latest. I do the same thing with the operating systems. I do not switch to major. I waited over a year, I think it was about a year and a half, before I went to Windows 11. Probably a year and a half on that one. On the Macs, when they come out with Sonoma, when they come out with a new one, it's 14.0. I waited till 14.2 before I upgraded on that kind of thing. I just don't upgrade. And it was the same thing. Let's back up. When Ventura came out, that was 13.0. And then they come out with 13.001. And then at some point, a few months later, 13.1. And then when it gets to about 13.2, which is anywhere from 3 to 6 months after the initial one, then I will go ahead and upgrade. So on the major operating systems, wait. And then, so for people that are on Sonoma, the one thing that's interesting is right now, there are some things that they're doing, and this will keep happening. And some of it has to do with security, and that's why they go to minimum support. Now, if you're not at Monterey or beyond, then you're going to end up with a situation that the new stuff may run, but there may be parts of it that don't work. Okay, and that's just life. All the software will be updating, and I'm not one of these, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, when it comes to the operating system type things. And I keep all my apps up to date, pretty close. But the operating system, I will wait approximately, on the Mac, I wait until it's whatever the major version. Today, if you were on Sonoma, it's 14, and it's 0.3 is now the current thing that's out. and I always wait until it's at least at 0.2, which is somewhere between 3 to 6 months. On Windows, I'll do sometimes longer with the major ones, but then the minor stuff, nope, I'm installing the security patches within weeks of them coming out. I'll wait a week or two. You can wait a month, but anything outside of that, I don't do, because you can just have the drive-by break-in. But if you have it, it can be kind of catastrophic. So keep your antivirus stuff up to date, keep your updates, at least the security patches. And yes, it causes problems, but it's the same with your car. If you don't keep your car locked, if you don't, then you're going to have some other problems. So if you're on RX, go ahead and check also which version you're on of those. Now that's a performance issue, and I do stay those. There's not a lot of liability, because you could also always install the previous generations. Those are all available. If I'm in Studio One, then on their home screen, they do have a little check for updates, but the number's sitting down here at the bottom. You can find that. I'm at December 13. It's 6.5.2. It's worth keeping up with this stuff. There are security issues. There are performance issues. It's just worth keeping up. Now, you don't need to do it the day after it comes out, but wait a couple weeks. Even this new one that just came out, 10.5, you could wait a couple weeks to do that. But the discussion in the group was, what about the operating system? What do I lose by staying back? You lose security. You can stay back on Monterey and RX will run, but I wouldn't, but you can. Okay? First off, there's risk in all of life. So you decide your risk level. There is risk that if you update and you're not on, then you can have a problem short term. There's also risk if you don't update, that you can have an even bigger problem where somebody hacks into your machine, and it'll be at random. They're not targeting me. I don't have anything valuable enough, but they target, hoping to find a debit card number that's on your machine. So anyway, all that stuff. Let me look at comments here and see. I got to refresh this one over here. Michael, hey, nice to meet you. Glad you're here from Florida. And let me look at the other ones here. I end up with two little dashboards that I have to monitor here. I didn't do my little breakout of that, and I really should. Let me see if I can break this out here and get this here, and we'll do this here, and it'll come up, and yeah, we get that thing going there. All right. So now we'll get some more stuff going up here, because what I don't think I had was all my people on yeah, on, what is it, YouTube. You think I'd know the name of these things. Let me see if YouTube I didn't break that one out. And if I didn't break that out, then, and I didn't, I did. All right, good. Yeah, I'm with the security. So let me go ahead and get this here. So, Joe, you commented. And does this new isotope work or not on on Catalina? I doubt it. It'll probably work. So Joe's question was, yeah, if he stays on Catalina, it may work, it may not work. If it's me, I wouldn't switch to this when they've talked about that their minimum is Monterey. There's something there that they know about. The reality is they have no incentive to stay back, to bring these forward, unless there's a specific issue in their testing. And will it affect you and me? I doubt it. Voiceover artists just use a subset of this stuff. So the only thing that staying back means is potential security issues for you unrelated to RX. RX Advanced, because this is their release notes for RX Advanced, there's a possibility that one of the tools doesn't work, and one of the tools depended on something in the OS for part of either its interface or the way it worked, the way it interacted. It can be as simple as the tools that do the text. Who knows? It could be one of 100 things. And if you stay back, don't upgrade to 10.50. Stay at 10.4.2. That's what I would do. If I'm not gonna get to this version, I would stick down at 10.4.2, and that's available. So that's definitely what I would do on that. Okay, I just wouldn't. By the way, and for those of you on RX, for those of you not using RX, hey, get yourself a great DAW and get RX. Those are the two tools you definitely want to have if you're staying in this business. And then there's other tools you can get optionally, but definitely those two. Everyone needs a great DAW and everyone needs RX. And I think that'll be even more so moving forward in the future, but yeah, that's the way that goes. You need help about, and then you get this screen with the numbers and you can click on it one time. And when you do that, boom, it will go away. Back to the normal screen. Studio One, you can see it at the bottom there, and there's a little check for updates there, and it'll tell you, are you up to date or not? And it doesn't go to a different screen. Every app virtually has under their, if they're on Windows, help and check for updates. If you're on my Mac, then it's going to be, in this case, it'd be the Studio One menu. It's also the same thing on my Mac. RX is under Isotope RX is the first menu, and under there is a check for updates. Okay, so you should be checking for updates every so often, and I do like to keep my apps up to date. I don't hang back. I know, so a lot of people have this, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, and that's okay. I just I don't do that. All right, and I do not know whether it works on Catalina. The one thing is, you can try it, and if it works for you, great. The big issue is if it doesn't work, they're not going to support it. So but you can always downgrade stuff, and you can do it with all your apps. If some of it's how much risk are you willing to take, and you can try it. Doesn't hurt anything, But yeah. So let me see what else going. Dun, 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 dun. I'm still on Ventura 1331. So Andrea, that's okay. Andrea's talking about she missed the first few minutes. So what? That's okay. And then at the same time, you're going to not. It's okay. If you can stay on Ventura at some point, and not all machines are going to support it. But here's something cool: you're not on 13.1. The people that are on 13 lessen this because Ventura has matured to the point where whatever the latest Ventura is, that's where the security fixes came in. They've fixed a bunch of things. I always love getting to the 0.2. 13.2 is when I switched to Ventura. So if you're going to be on it, you're on the latest one of that. And I think, as somebody put in the comments here, I can't remember which ones. I can't remember no, I know absolutely now that I'm thinking about it. Then Sonoma's next. But you're on the latest version of Ventura. Cool. You'll do fine. And Andrea, I'm on a MacBook. I'm using, yeah, right now, by the way. So you're using RX9, Andrea. That works with Ventura. I don't think Ventura is after Monterey, so you can't update to Monterey. So I know it looks like you can, but it can't. I don't think so. If I'm getting it mixed up, Monterey, if I remember right, is I want to say it's 12. I get mixed up anymore. I have to go look it up. There is a page. If you Google Mac operating system version numbers, then you'll get a whole list of all the versions in order. But after you're on Ventura, the next one after Ventura is Sonoma, and that's 14. And now 14 is getting safe, but depending on whether your machine supports it or not. And that probably is what you were saying there. Yeah. Okay. So you definitely you're on Ventura a year later, and I think you meant going to Sonoma, so that's pretty cool too. All right. So let me check on my things here and just make sure I'm answering. Yeah. And by the way, Joe, I guarantee it doesn't work on something. Okay. I guarantee you they found something, or they would not have upgraded that. The question is, what among all the things that they have there, whether it makes any difference to you and me, I don't know. I mean, 'cause there's a lot of options here in advance that most people don't use, and that you and I are not going to use on any given day. And so all the normal things, or all the easy things, they will probably work. But when they don't, or on the batch processing, because remember, batch processors are accessing the operating system. There could be a security check now that by the way they read and write This would be my guess, by the way. I have no clue on this for sure. But it's possible that because the batch processor does a bunch of read and writes, a lot of them on files from the drive, and they're big files, and there probably is something new security wise that they can't support on the older version. And so maybe your batch process fails at the end when it has to write things, when it's writing multiple versions of, and the operating system sees, hey, you're writing all this data and you're writing different file formats, and maybe WAV files work great, and then MP3 files fail. So it also can look like it's working at first, and then later it will fail because there's so many moving parts that could happen that it may not have anything to do with all these modules, and may have something to do specifically with reading and writing when you're talking about batch processes, or you're saving a module chain. You could do a whole big long thing, and at some point some save isn't going to work. I don't know. I really don't know. And they don't document what or why. They just kind of say, hey, you have to be within a couple generations. And Ventura has been out for so long. Somebody find out how long Ventura's been around. I'm going to guess that Ventura is, I'm going to guess it's 2.5 years old at this point. So I mean, it's never going to get more stable, and it's certainly more stable. So, and of course, the only reason somebody shouldn't do it is if your machine doesn't support it. But most of the machines out there that we're going to be using on a day-to-day basis, especially someone on RX10, where horsepower and is you really want every bit of memory and horsepower you want. Yeah, go ahead and get yourself on Ventura if you can. Okay, maybe I can't go to Sonoma, but get to Ventura. That's a big win. Certainly get up to whatever the Monterey is. Ventura came out October. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. October 2022. So, what's that? A year and a few months. Okay, 13 months ago, and so that's, yeah. So it's about as mature. It's never going to get more mature. One, they're not working on it. They will issue security patches, but even those are not as comprehensive and not the same as what they're doing, where they have to keep up to date with the current one. That's priority one. Then they work their way back. So if there's a problem, they're going to work their way back. And that's just the way they're always going to do it. They're always trying to get everybody to the latest version, and we're stuck with that. Okay. So what else we want to talk about today? What else come up? I should look in the groups. People asking about all sorts of interesting stuff. Somebody had something where they had a door, and they want to take out the door. Now they didn't send me by the way, so I thought it was pretty good. And what somebody did, somebody had a door slam in a live performance, and they couldn't have the person re-record it. And what they happened to find was the word that came up later in the interview. They copied it, pasted it in, did a little bit of manipulation, and nobody will notice that they switched out the word from a previous version to from a later version and put it in there, and now they don't hear the door slam distraction as much. Now, they also didn't post a sample because it's something that a lot of times, using instant process and using spectral repair, that I suspected we could take out 80% of it, 90% of it here. And just by the way, sometimes we don't need something to be perfect if it's a live performance. We need it to the point where the distraction is minimized. And in this case, they totally took it out. Now, what I don't know, because I didn't hear the final, was when someone splices in the word that came later in the interview, it's the same word, but did it have the same feel? It may be its own little distraction, and it may be less than the distraction from hearing the door slam that was in their original audio. Since I didn't hear the audio itself, I cannot tell you whether that was the case. Okay, so it works out that, but it's a great solution, by the way. And the best solution is to re-record if you can, if someone slams the door. The second best solution is find something in there where you can put it in, and then, but it amazes me of how many times I can take spectral repair and combine it with instant process and take out a door slam or something like that. And take out is too big of a word. It's like soundproofing. We never soundproof, but sometimes I don't argue against people who say the word soundproof anymore, and I see a lot of other people aren't either. So we'll get on a side note here. You can't soundproof. It doesn't exist. Um, at least within some budgets that are under hundreds of thousands, and I just don't think it's it really doesn't happen. For our purposes, though, people will use the word soundproof, meaning sound treatment, minimizing what is getting into our recording space, and isolation. So we're going to soundproof a space, you'll hear people say, and all of us engineering types and geeky types will go, oh, you can't soundproof, and I agree, 100%. But there are things in life that you can't fight against, sort of, where people start using words incorrectly, and which would be similar to the word master. I've mastered music in my day. I cut master records, and in that there's a mastering engineer that takes the final mix that comes off of an engineer, the mix engineer, and you modify it so that your records won't skip. You modify it so that it won't distort on a CD. You take the work of art that a mastering engineer has put together, that the mixing engineer has put together, and you do the least amount of sculpting to make sure it doesn't skip and it doesn't. So you're doing all sorts of things, jumping through all sorts of hoops to try different things. And a lot of times it's EQ related, compression related, limiter related. There are a bunch of details you can do, tools you can use to take something that sounds the way an engineer wants it to sound and allows it to work in a different medium. It's a pretty complicated process, to be honest with you, because there's so many variables and music is so wide. Where spoken word, some bozo early on started calling engineering for hitting the specs right, so that if I go in and I take this little piece of audio right here and I measure it, and now I've mastered it for ACX, for example. This would pass ACX's steps, and it's really volume management for hitting an audiobook, volume management for hitting for what we'd want for voiceover. And then we use RX to polish it beyond that. So that word mastering, somebody started using it in the voiceover context, and it used to irritate me. But, over time, you get less irritated by stuff when you start realizing, I don't care how irritated Don gets, nobody cares. They're going to call it mastering when working with voiceover, when I don't consider it mastering. It's hitting the volume specs with a couple tools. It's not some black art. It's a well-worn path. Anybody can hit these specs quickly and easily with the right tools. And so I'm just looking at stats here, and this is within the stats. Now this one happens to be louder by maybe a dB, but it'll fully within the stats. I'll just throw in an aside. If you're getting all the specs in for an audiobook and you're just barely coming into the specs so that you're just barely within the quietest, and that would be minus 20 through 22. Let me take this gain here. I'm at 18. And if I subtracted, 3 here, render that out, what's my specs come out to? I didn't use my keyboard shortcut. I went the wrong way. By the way, see there, I'm out of spec. So we'll undo that. Undo. Okay. If you don't know, have undo under your fingertips. Have undo under your fingertips, because it is the thing I use the absolute most for. Then it's my number one command, and that's because I mess more up than you do. And I will hit this up again. All right, 22.19. So now what's happening is I'm getting close to the edge here, and I'm going to go minus 0.5 and render that out. So now I'm getting close. I'm at minus 22.7. That's about as quiet as you can go. I got a couple tenths in there that I could mess with before I hit the edge of too quiet on ACX. Just note, for those of you who are newer, don't do that. One, this is if I take this WAV file and I export it as an MP3, I'll just do it here. File, export, create an MP3. I'm going to create it at 192 here, and then I'll reopen it. And so I'm going to just take it and export it. And yep, I don't really care where it is. Save it. I don't care what it's named. export it. Oh, look at that. We had this. I could have predicted this, and I'll talk about it in a second. We're at 22.69, and this one is at 22.96. Wait a minute. I thought I had measured this. Well, I had measured it as a WAV file. As soon as you go to MP3, by definition, what does an MP3 file do? What's the biggest characteristic of an MP3 file versus a WAV file? Most of you know this. It's that an MP3 is a smaller file. Now, how do you think they make it smaller? They remove some stuff. So this file has some audio removed. Are you going to hear the difference? Most of the time, no. Some of you can, because there is a difference between a WAV file and an MP3, especially at 192. But it's right on the edge of what most people can hear. And so we start with this interesting thing. If we're starting, I guarantee you I'll guarantee you one thing. An MP3 is always the same volume or quieter than a WAV file. So if I am right on the edge of, if your audio is right on the edge of the quietest that it can be, when you go to MP3, you can end up blowing the specs. So see right there, now this is a short sample. This whole sample is 55 seconds. On longer samples, the drop can be much, much, much higher. So I can drop a half a dB easily. I can drop up to 1.5 dBs on the total RMS on a very long file. Totally material dependent. You can't predict in advance how much it'll go down. It could stay close to the same, but what's happened is MP3 is not save as MP3. I know we think of it that way. That's why it's under the export. It's actually encode, and you are converting and encoding to MP3. And what's the big picture on an MP3? An MP3 is taking out information that the algorithm believes nobody would hear anyway. So it's a reduced quality version, but the quality reduction is so tiny. And if people are listening on their smartphones, I predict nobody would hear the difference on a smartphone between a WAV file and an MP3 in the 90x% case. Okay, you have to really do a lot. And then the dirty secret in the audiobook world is if you send in a sample that's super quiet, they're going to turn it up later. So and in the ACX's case, the quality of their processes is lowest common denominator. It's not optimum. And so your goal is, rather than send something in that's at 22.69, and we need to hit the other specs there in terms of the peaks, that we are sending something in for our audiobooks, and I'm going to just +4 on this just for fun. 18, okay, that's fine. I like to be in 19.5. But if I'm on the louder side, ACX does less. So that's all I'll say about that. Don't send in things at the -22 level. Send them in at the -19 level. And you don't have to hit that as a target, but just in that area, and life is even better. Okay? So let me look at the comments here. Had some ambient echo and boxiness. First thing, boxiness is a term that people who, I hate that term. There's another term that I hate. First off, no, most of these engineers will not define what that is. Okay? Now, so it's a catch-all term, but if you have some echo, it's possible that the room treatment needs to be improved. That happens to all of us. And the more you do this, the more you will hear. So I don't like the word boxiness because people have different definitions of it. There's no one definition of it. It's more like calling Don ugly. I mean, first off, it might be true. That's that part. We'll leave that aside. But what's the definition of ugly? Why is Don ugly? Yeah, well, I know it when I see it. I look at him, he's ugly. Okay, that's fine, but that's not the way this business works. That engineer should be able to tell you what needs to be changed if they think it's boxy. And I'll tell you what I've done a whole bunch, especially, and also, and you have some publishers out there, some people that take in Voice Bunny is a perfect example of this. Voice Bunny's one of the worst. They're probably not the worst. They're probably one of the worst. That they have a quota every day of things that they need to reject. And so they'll tell you when they don't know what to tell you and they just need to reject stuff, they'll say your audio is boxy. How do I know this? Because I have clients and a son who was working with them a few years ago and sent the same audio in with the same processing 100 times before then some engineer rejected it and said it was boxy. And then we go, well, what about these other 100 things that we've sent in over the last 3 or 4 years? And they're like, oh, well, no. Oh, that was a mistake with our software. They they just have to reject a certain amount at that firm. And so they use it as a catch-all term. They don't know, they don't want to tell you, hey, this is really good, but I don't have time to look at it. They just say, well, it sounds boxy. So I always take that with a grain of salt. Um, yeah, and then uh, let's see. And as far as the plugins, yeah, so here's the other thing. Most people that do raw, most raw isn't raw for most people. Many people have denoiser. Oh wait, back up. Many people have multi-click on them, even when they're supposed to be quote raw. That's fine. It's transparent. What they really want is they don't want it to be that you've modified the audio in a way that affects your voice. A high pass is fine. A multi-click, they don't say it's fine, but when it's done right. And some people use a declicker as a mouth declicker. That's a mistake. And that's something that absolutely they'll be bothered by because it'll sound funny if they're using this incorrectly. So yeah, it depends on what you do. But it'd be the same as makeup, same as doing my hair, same as no one wants to see me raw, no clothes. That's not enticing. So clothes make the man, at least in my case. It's certainly an upgrade. And there are a lot of people. So there is context to it. Depends on which firm you're working with. And just don't, and you can turn off all your plugins. And if they ask for raw, then it's always, it's in their case, first it's going to be quieter, so you can't turn it up to the same levels if it's raw. It's not going to be as loud. You definitely can't have the compressor on it. A limiter, yeah, you're not going to be loud anyway, so you're not going to blow the specs there. So there are things you can do, and even I have some high-profile narrators that even have some minor denoising going on, but you better do it in a way that's transparent, and you better know what you're doing if you're going to do that kind of stuff, because they do get ticked off if you can see in this one, by the way, this one's had some denoise. So here's what I see right here, and I'm gonna undo that because I see that right there. I can tell somebody's manipulated this audio. I can tell by the way it looks. If you know enough, you can tell how it looks. I can tell if pizza, by the way, so I haven't I fasted yesterday after my trip, and I'm, I don't know, 27 hours right now from last time I've eaten. And I'm not hungry, but I kind of go, okay, yeah, pretty soon we're going to eat here. I'm not trying to do a multi-day fast. I just happened to decide, I'm going to do 24 hours. And then I've been busy. And so I'm at, I don't know, 27 or something. It doesn't really matter. Um, different fasting, different levels, it's not all just one. It's not, oh, I'm fasting and here it is. It's all that it's all the same. Same with food quality. If I'm going to make pizza, lots of things. You can tell if the pizza dough is done. I had cookies when I was on my little trip here that I just went on, because the hotel had cookies. Okay, I needed more cookies, like I need another hole in my head type thing. I didn't need them, but they were there. That's why I don't, by the way, that's why I don't have the same thing at home, because I ate too many of those dumb things. Totally my fault, by the way. I'm responsible. Nobody put a gun to my head and told Don that he had to eat an extra couple cookies. Okay, I did it anyway though because I liked them, and but if I look at cookie dough, there are a couple of cookies like peanut butter cookies that I absolutely love. Oatmeal raisin cookies I absolutely love. Macadamian I absolutely love. Macadamian white chocolate, absolutely my jam. I have a sweet tooth for that kind of stuff. But you could look at them if you bake those cookies all the time. You know what they look like when they're fully baked, when they're partially baked. Yeah, anybody that cooks anything, they know what an egg over easy looks like versus an egg well done. They just happen to know this stuff about what it looks like when you cook food, and it's the same when you cook audio. You know what it looks like if somebody's manipulated it. Some tools can be absolutely transparent. And I could take this audio here, back out all the things that were there. So right now you can see that there's some noise right here. Okay. Now I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to the end, paste it in. I needed some more audio. Okay. So now I can drill in here. So watch this. So there's some noise right here. You can see it. It's on my screen. Now, if you're really good and really good. Why am I really good? By the way, let's make one thing clear. I'm pretty good at RX. I've done 20, 30,000 files over my career. I'm probably higher than that, but I know absolutely where I've processed and listened from end to end to see the result of what I'm doing. And so, yeah, you do that much of something over the years, and I'm going to take spectral noise, I'm going to have it learn here, and I don't want that much. That's way too extreme. If I were doing something that I needed to look raw, I'm going to test this, and here's something interesting. I'm going to take these numbers right now, and I'm just going to show you that if you knew what you were doing, that's at minus 67 right there, native. And then I'm going to render this out, and now I'm getting into a zone that, hey, if you're not in a basement, if you're not in a super well-treated room, that's going to be very hard to get to this level of quiet. So if somebody took this and they said, all right, well, I want to send these engineers super clean stuff, and I'm just going to go through and I'll render that out there. Well, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to look at this and go, man, if Don isn't in a basement here, then that's just almost impossible. Or he's in a very, very well treated room. We're getting into a zone there. That would work right there. That's possible, but it depends on the total RMS. And yeah. So in other words, I could look at this and tell you, hey, is somebody manipulated it or not? If they're not working out of a really well treated space, then I would know they manipulated it. Now, if it's a Johnny Heller that has a great space and is invested because he's been in the business a long time, so he's invested in this nice room, then he can go ahead and have a quieter space, and you go, oh, he has a whisper room, so okay. Oh, he's in a basement. Yeah, that makes sense. And if somebody's new to the business and they're sending in their first sample, if they're not in the basement, then this might be a little too much. It's unusual to be that quiet, and to have their voice this loud. Okay? It's unusual. It's not impossible. It's unusual. So some things I can do transparently, some things I can't. And so, but just be careful as you're sending things in to different engineers. I do constantly get things that say, sometimes they will come back with something that doesn't make sense. And here's the boxiness thing that I'll always just crack me up. I've gone through a couple times. I'll take out all this stuff. So I'm at the beginning. What's my, let me look at the stat. All right, this is really loud, okay? This is definitely not raw. It's definitely had some treatment. I can tell just looking at it, a compressor's been applied. Let's see if I have anything in here that, yeah, that's there. That one definitely doesn't have noise clip example. Oh, look at this. See how dark this is? This is this part here is unachievable without something going on. Let's see if look at this one. This one has a whole bunch of noise. Now, what could I do? I could make this noise, diminish it, and I can tell looking at it because of the levels. This is probably raw audio. It hasn't been compressed. I can tell by the look at it. I can tell looking at this that look at all that noise that's there. You can see it, you can taste it, and you can hear it. Okay? And from 100, I don't know, from 4 miles away, I can see all this stuff. And what I'd have to do is not get it to production levels. I would end up going through and saying spectral denoise, and I'm going to have it learn that guy. And I might go ahead and say, okay, let me manipulate this gently and put in some noise reduction curve here and bring this down just a little bit and this here, and let's see what that looks like. That looks better. And undo that there. It's now kind of showing people, hey, could I go through and make it better? Yep. And from the look of that, as an engineer, because of a couple different things, because I have good tools and know how to use them, I'm able to bring that down to a much, much better level. Now, Did I take out everything? Nope. I left some stuff in. I might take out even a little less than that. I might go back. Big picture. If you're not going to send it in raw, if you're going to send it in raw, have a good room. If your room isn't as strong, there are sometimes some things we can do to make it better, and you can do the minimum stuff, and just don't go crazy. I don't want to send them in production. This is not compressed. I can tell just looking at it, and it's also going to be quieter. It's not going to be production level. It's at -22. That's actually pretty loud for that. And I would probably turn it down a little bit because most people aren't going to be quite that loud natively, but I can tell it's not compressed just by the visuals. And if I turn it this way, you can tell too. Okay. You can tell looking at it. Or they have a bad compressor. So, yeah. All right. So let's talk about it. Let's see what else, if anything. I'm often a silent observer of these. I just want to thank you for sharing all the knowledge. Oh, thank you. KW, you're welcome. And be sure that you're welcome to be silent. Appreciate you being there. That's awesome. And if you have questions, be sure to ask. And you can ask privately before the session. Say, hey, here's something. Can you discuss this or that? Super duper. So today we're talking about noise reduction and raw and operating systems and things like that. And I think we're pretty good. But I appreciate you more than you appreciate me. It's really crazy. I'm always happy that people are there asking questions. And here's the funny thing. If you have a question, 200 other people had that same question, but they were afraid to ask. So it's super cool when people ask questions because we end up with a situation that your question is the same as a whole bunch of other people. Okay, I know you're special. Get that up front. But you're going to have a similar question to everybody else. That's just the way it goes. And it's the same with everything else I'm doing. I'm learning pickleball. I keep talking about that every week because I'm doing it every week. I have the same struggles that everybody else learning pickleball has. Well, how do you learn the stupid scoring system if you're playing doubles? It's really, at first, everybody struggles with it because it's different. It's unique. But once you get it on, no big deal. But everybody seems to, first month they're playing, 2 weeks, whatever. How do you do that scoring thing again? Because it's just not what we're used to doing. And so my questions about it were the same as almost everybody else. And now I'm 6, 7 months into it. I see other people have the same questions that I had. So when you have a question, be sure to do it. My dog's sitting behind me, and he'll have some of the same questions as the rest of us. So it really, So also, and Andrea had one other thing. Yeah, I turned off the plugins because it's raw. If you had recorded the template made for you with the plugins that showed them, yes, because they have a compressor and they bring audio up to the volume levels that they need to be for finals. Raw audio is never going to be at the same level, so we'd have to selectively turn off some of them, and potentially, depending on how treated your room is, we may have to treat that too. So you have some processes in a combination of Studio One and RX that take out the background noise, take out details in the background. That's normal in a home studio setting. It's not cheating using good tools to produce great audio. It is not cheating anymore. And you will get some people say, oh, I don't want to use anything. Well, they still use a limiter. They still might use a compressor. They might use an EQ. They use a high pass. That's manipulating the audio. They do change it. So everybody does some of it. It's just your definition of how much to do and how little to do. Be sure you know what you're doing if you're manipulating it and you're supposed to send in raw. If you're not sure, check with somebody. Pay somebody else to do it for you. That's kind of what you're going to have to do. You can try doing it yourself, but if I can tell as an engineer that you have done something and we told you to send in raw, then they get a little bothered. And if it's a new relationship, if it's the first time I've worked with somebody and we've asked them to send in something a certain way and then they ignore us, well, what does that imply? It implies that you're not going to listen to the other things I've asked you to do either. And then you assume a tri-comp is a compressor. Yes, in the case of Studio One, tri-comp is a compressor. It's a tube emulation of a old school, really, really nice, very expensive compressor that was used in the old days. And because of it being tube-based, it's a little bit warmer. It's really an absolutely stellar piece of software that was originally designed for musicians to get a sound that's amazing. Most people won't know the difference. They just kind of go, hey, you sound great. And it's so good at doing what it does that it just sounds great. And that's just, yeah. So tricomp's a compressor that should not be on. People will notice it. I can tell looking at this. So, I mean, if I look across what I happen to have loaded in here, this one's had a compressor applied to it. Is it a good compressor or a bad compressor? Well, that I can't tell you without listening to it. I don't remember where this specific file came from. And I can look at it. This is compressed audio. Look at the difference between non-compressed. I have to find something here. If we look at it and we look at this, see, this one's been compressed. You can tell just looking at it, just like you can with the cookies that are baked or not baked. Not compressor. Yeah, this one could be a little bit compressed, but because, yeah, this one will have a compressor on it. Some won't, and this one does too. Most of the things I happen to have today. This was just a random set of things I had open that I haven't closed down in the past. Okay, so we've talked about operating systems. Can you discuss the ways to collaborate with another? Yeah, using Studio One. I want to work on a dual narration project. I'm looking for ideas of how to do it. That's a fantastic subject. I've had some people that are doing multicast projects where um, first off, if you're working on an audiobook with multiple people, that's a real process. Okay, it definitely takes some things, even to have two people. So let me duplicate this track, and I've experimented with a macro toolbar. When I select tracks, yeah. I have something here where you could record and record it on multiple tracks at one time. So watch this. I've been testing this and messing around with it, and I can record, and I'm recording voice one, and then I'm going to record. Oh, that's going to voice three, and this is a test. So right now it's not working. I don't know what I did. I don't remember how I had this. I know it had to have the right name in it, and this doesn't have the right name in it, and I can't remember what the name was, but I could figure that out. Shoot. Raw one. I think I had some names here, and if my tracks are named right, then what will happen is, as I'm going here, that's going to one. Oh, there it is. I got one and two. All right. So watch this. So if someone was doing a dual narration, what you can do is this. So this is something I'm experimenting with because it's a constant thing. My wife and I have done a whole bunch of these things where you're narrating, and so I'll talk more about it next week. But just to give you an idea, you can do nutso things like this, where I'm going to go ahead and go back all the way home. I'm going to record, and here's voice one, and what I can do, and I'll explain this more next week. I think I pressed number two, and number one, number two. Oh, it went to it. I see it. Hold on. I have to turn on an option. Watch this. All right. I'll do it for next week. I have a way that, well, here's what'll happen. You're recording. So you have one narrator that records their part, and then when they get to the other person, they press a button or a keyboard shortcut, and it'll automatically switch to their track, and then you can switch back and forth. And you either record a placeholder for where theirs is going to be, or you record their whole dialogue if you want to. And I'm experimenting with both, and I've got a cool system that will allow you to go back and forth, and it'll actually, that way your track will be your stuff, then they can put all their stuff on another track, and then you can manipulate them individually. So if my voice is louder, quieter, and then somebody else's voice is quieter, or they have more noise or less noise than my room, I can process them independently and then combine them all together, and I can deal with all the timing issues that come up when you're doing dual voice. Okay, so I'll work on that for next week so that we have a discussion about it, and I'll just show it. I already did it for one, but when I did it, I had specific names that were required on the track labels here in order to make that work, and I did it so that somebody could switch among 7 or 8 voices. I think it was 8 voices total, and yeah, you can do all that stuff with the good DAWs. You can do it in Studio One, you could do it in Reaper, you could do it in I don't know if you could do it in Audition because they don't support macros and that kind of thing. But you can do it in many of them, and you can switch and have it automatically change, automatically record. And so I can have placeholders for all the other dialogue, or I could just record those parts, but fake it. And I'll explain all that next week. All right. What you do need to do, Steve, is no, Chris. That's something that remind me next week, and then send me a message the day before, like next Monday, so that I just remember it, and I'll throw that on my list. But and then let me see what Steve. Great chair, missed the news. Oh, wasn't too serious. Yeah. So first off, somebody died. Don't mean to laugh about that. But my uncle lived a fantastic life. If I so inspiring, and got into his late 80s and bike rode 50,000 miles, and even bike rode across the state of Michigan in his 70s. Okay. So inspiring. Great life. Great guy. Somebody who was instrumental in my childhood. And so very sad to see him pass. But you know what? I hope I do it half as well as him in terms of both inspiring people and he was a just absolute great guy, helped out an awful lot for different things in life and inspired so many people that I can't help but smile. I was privileged to know him. And so, yeah, we're all sad, but you know what? Everybody's got that. I hope to emulate him. I'm very inspired by, and I get a chance to think about, gee, could I be as good as Uncle Danny, and can I do stuff? And we all need that inspiration of somebody who does it right and gets to, live a nice long life and help a bunch of people and inspire a bunch of people, and instrumental in my childhood. So I hope everybody else has their own inspiration, and sometimes it's a relative and sometimes it's not a relative. I also have my first drum instructor, Gene Stewart, who passed, who anything I do well in teaching today or coaching or helping somebody else, the roots of that came out of a gentleman named Gene Stewart, who was a master instructor and a master coach. Back then, nobody called him a coach, but they called him an instructor. And he actually was a coach, and he was a life coach as well as teaching someone how to play a musical instrument. And I didn't recognize it at the time because I was just frustrated that he wouldn't teach me taking care of business. For those of you that I'll have to get taken care of business. I just went to this guy and wanted to learn taking care of business. And instead he taught me how to play drums, but he also taught me how to learn. Learning how to learn is the biggest skill that we can pass on to somebody else, and something that I aspire to be as strong as Gene Stewart and my Uncle Danny. And, so I hope you have the same thing. So I'm inspired. I'm happy this week to have known this person, and happy that I was able to be a small part of somebody who did a bunch of great things for a lot of people. And I just hope I can follow in that trend, not tradition, that mold that he did. And, he has nothing. I mean, we're sad that he's gone, but we're all inspired. My cousins, even his son, I mean, it was just fantastic. So very inspiring. So it's that weird thing in life. You get older like I am, and you kind of go, okay, some people inspire and they, so we can be sad, but we're also happy for them. So I happen to get a good one this time. We've all had those. My dad's been gone 40 years, so I've been through this before. My sister's been gone 40 years. So, but inspired. All right. So I'm happy it works. So we'll see you all next Tuesday. I appreciate all the nice things people say about, I appreciate all the condolences, but I want to almost push back on people, but I understand we all want to do that when somebody passes and say sorry for your loss. It is a loss for me on one hand, but it's definitely a reminder. Life's short. Do the right things where you can. Help a lot of people. I hope to follow in that mold and be like my Uncle Danny. All right. So, all right. I do not. That's the wrong thing to end this with. Such a great person. And so I want to emulate that. Next week, I think it was, I have to look back here at who said it, to collaborate with other narrators. So I'll bring that up, and just, Chris, be sure to ask me or remind me next week, and I'll be prepared to do a demo on it of some ideas. One of the biggest problems are You could be recording for a couple hours or a 10-hour book and it needs to go back and forth. How in the world are you going to do that? Well, I have some good ideas on it, I think, and some things you can do that will allow you to mark and you could do it in different pieces of software. I'll show it in Studio One probably because I know that the best. It's the thing I work with, and there are some easy things you can do. But you could do this in a lot of software. And you really have to be mindful because it becomes a nightmare putting that stuff together if you don't think about it in advance. Matter of fact, for anybody that's ever taken two narrators and put them together will tell you absolutely you can burn insane amounts of time. And this is what happens too many times. One of the narrators volunteers, oh, I'll put it all together. It's like, oh, cool. They don't realize very often that task might be easy, and a lot of times it ain't because the two rooms sound different. And unless you go ahead and get the room tone sounding reasonable, so you better have good tools if you're going to take that on. And it's helpful if you have some experience, because if you don't take that task on. Hey, I'm not putting them together. It's a different set of skills, and to do it really well requires having tools. It's helpful if you have some experience. Anybody could do it, but you better have a lot more time than what you think if you want it to sound like you're in the same room. So there is some art there to that and some experience that comes in. All right. So you guys have a fantastic day, fantastic week. I appreciate you being here. Tell others about the show next Tuesday. We'll be talking about collaboration between narrators and how you can do it better or easier and make it cleaner, and the harder ways. I'll just put together something that talks about the harder ways. I've done it the hard way, by the way. If you can do it wrong, I've done it wrong. I mean, I've already done it wrong because I didn't even know how difficult it would be. And I can't go through everything, but I can give you some things to avoid. And don't just go, hey, you record your part, I'll record my part, and then I'll put it together. Well, here's what I predict. If you do that and just say, hey, just do it, I'll do it, put it all together, you've got some long days in front of you doing that, a lot more than what you expect. So hopefully you're getting paid for it, because if you're just doing it to be nice, good luck on that one. All right. I mean, I'm not saying you can't. I am saying that you will regret that you didn't go ahead and get paid for it, because it's a non-trivial thing to do. All right. Happy Tuesday. No, happy Wednesday. I'm so confused. I'm all messed up this week. But I'll see you next week. Thanks for attending. And as always, we'll see you on the wires. Bye-bye.